Of course, it looks like the text you provided has some formatting issues and a duplicated section. I have cleaned it up, removed the repetition, and formatted it into proper paragraphs for easier reading. Here is the corrected and complete version of chapters 1 and 2. 303. Everyone mocked the Omega for not being normal, until the Alpha Prince chose him above Omega. Verse chapter 1. A circumflex euros the guard and crowned the grand hall of Valara Keep. A fortress carved from the very spine of the dragon. Euros trade Tooth Mountains resonated with a hushed, weighty silence of impending ceremony. It was a silence not born of reverence, but of anticipation, a brittle tension that hummed beneath the gilded arches and across the obsidian tiles. Gold light, fractured and diffused by the ancient stained glass windows depicting the triumphs of the Varel lineage, splashed across the polished floor like liquid fire licking at a dark, unyielding surface. The air, usually thick with the scent of old stone and the faint metallic tang of ancient battles, was now a cloying mixture of expensive courtly oils, nervous sweat, and the carefully restrained sense of the assembled nobility. Every breath seemed to hold the weight of centuries of tradition, a suffocating expectation that Raven, the new king, felt pressing down on him. Alpha King Raven of House Varel stepped forward, the long, heavy cloak of black wolf fur, edged with the deep crimson of his house, trailing behind his equally crimson-trimmed armor. Each step was deliberate, measured, a testament to the iron will that had brought him to this throne. He was barely past 27, yet the lines of command were already etched around his winter-steel eyes, and the weight of a crown forged in blood and war sat heavily on his brow. His broad shoulders, honed by years of training and recent campaigns, filled the ornate armor, and his raven dark hair, usually unbound in battle, was now pulled back in a severe warrior Euros trade knot, revealing the sharp angles of his jaw. His coronation had been swift, brutal, and necessary, following the unexpected death of his father and the subsequent war that had threatened to tear the kingdom of Valara asunder. The pack, still reeling from loss and victory, was watching his every move, every breath, searching for any sign of weakness, any crack in the facade of the formidable young king. He did not intend to give them any. "Your Majesty," Captain Liros, head of the Royal Guard, announced, his voice a low rumble that barely disturbed the Hala Euros trade's oppressive quiet. Liros, a grizzled alpha with a scent of old leather and loyalty, bowed deeply, his armored form a stark contrast to the more flamboyant attire of the court. "As you requested, your new personal guard has arrived." Raven, who had been mentally reviewing the Dare Euros trade's endless petitions and the strategic implications of the southern border skirmishes, turned his gaze. His attention, usually sharp and dissecting, snagged, then stopped. The Omega stood in the exact center of the hall, a solitary figure against the backdrop of bowing nobles and ancient stone. He was clad in matte black armor, unadorned and functional, fitted to his form with an almost unsettling precision. It was the armor of a frontline soldier, not the ceremonial garb usually worn by Omegas in the royal court. And his former Euros Ravna Euros trade's eyes, trained to assess and categorize, took in the details. Taller than most Omegas, significantly so, his frame was solid, broad-shouldered, and muscled in a way that spoke of rigorous training and physical labor, not the delicate, often slight build typical of his designation. His presence was unyielding, a quiet, formidable force that seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it. And then there was his scent. Ravna Euros trade's nostrils flared almost imperceptibly. It was a subdued blend, unlike anything he had ever associated with an Omega. burnt cedar, like the smoldering embers of a distant campfire, mingled with a crisp, clean tang of smoke after a rainstorm. There was no cloying sweetness, no delicate floral notes, no inviting warmth that usually marked an Andar Eurostrade's presence. There was no perfume to mask it, no hint of flirtation in its quiet strength, and certainly no underlying current of submission. He stood like a soldier, not just any soldier, but one who had seen battle and emerged unbowed. Raven felt a strange, unfamiliar pull in his chest, a low thrumming that resonated with something primal deep within his alpha core. The scent called to it, yes, but it wore euros off. Not wrong, not repulsive, but profoundly unexpected. Intriguing. It was like finding a rare, uncatalogued species in a familiar forest, a creature that defied all known classifications. "What are Eurostrade's your name?" Raven asked, his voice smooth, almost deceptively so, but edged with a subtle rasp of command. He watched the Omater closely, searching for the telltale flinch, the downcast eyes, the nervous tremor that usually accompanied an Omater addressing an alpha of his standing, let alone a king. The Omater bowed, but only slightly. It was a formal dip of the head, a concession to protocol, not a deep, subservient genuflection. It was just enough to acknowledge the Kinder Eurostrade's authority without implying personal deference. "Kyle, your majesty. Son of Jorn, of the mountain lineage." Kyle, the name was as stark and unadorned as his armor. His hair was a dark chestnut brown, cut short at the sides, almost shaved, and pushed back from a high, intelligent forehead. It was practical, not fashionable. A prominent scar, a clean, pale line, ran from the edge of his right brow, bisecting his temple to just beneath his cheekbone. It was clearly an old wound healed perfectly, and worn without any attempt to conceal it, a testament to a past battle, perhaps even a badge of honor. His eyes, Raven noted, were storm gray, the color of a winter sky heavy with snow, and they met the Kinder Eurostrade's gaze unflinchingly, without a hint of fear or evasion. No fear, Raven thought, a flicker of something akin to admiration, quickly suppressed, sparking in his mind. And no pretense. "You were at the Battle of River Haleth," Raven stated, his voice a low observation rather than a question. River Haleth, the turning point of the war, a brutal, bloody conflict where Raven himself had nearly fallen. Kyle nodded once, a crisp, military movement. "Second shield wall, your majesty." The second shield wall. That had been the most heavily contested line, the one that had borne the brunt of the enemy Eurostrade's final, desperate surge. Raven remembered the chaos, the desperate cries, the scent of blood and fear thick in the air. He remembered a blur of black armor, a flash of steel, and a searing pain in his side that had vanished as quickly as it came, replaced by the thud of a body hitting the ground. "You took a blade meant for me," Raven said, the words emerging almost involuntarily, a memory surfacing from the fog of battle. "It was my duty." Kyler Eurostrade's voice was even, devoid of pride or self-pity. Just a statement of fact. Ravna Eurostrade's lips twitched, a faint, almost imperceptible movement that was not quite a smile but a hint of something close to it. "Then I owe you a life." Kyler Eurostrade's gaze flickered, a movement so subtle Raven almost missed it. It was gone in an instant, replaced by that same unyielding stare. "No bets, your majesty. Just orders." The hall seemed to grow colder, somehow, the air thinning, the silence deepening. The assembled nobles, usually so adept at masking their emotions, shifted uneasily. Whispers, like the rustle of dry leaves, rippled through the ranks. An omega with no sweetness, no coyness, euros, no fear. It made them nervous. It made him curious, dangerously so. The king descended from the dais, the heavy thud of his armored boots echoing against the polished stone, each sound amplified in the sudden, profound quiet. He began to circle Kyle slowly, his eyes never leaving the omega, assessing him from every angle, as if Kyle were a new, formidable weapon he was considering adding to his arsenal. The scent of burnt cedar and smoke grew stronger as Raven drew closer, a clean, sharp scent that cut through the cloying perfumes of the court. "They say you refused heat suppressants during the campaign," Raven stated, his voice low, a predatory purr. It was a dangerous accusation, a breach of protocol for an omega, especially one in the military. Heat cycles were meant to be managed, suppressed, to prevent distractions and maintain order. For an omega to refuse Themer euros, it was unheard of. That your scent, unmasked, made the enemy believe you were an alpha. Tyler euros trade's posture remained rigid, his gaze unwavering. "I needed my enemies to hesitate, sire, to misjudge. You don't euros trade tea smell like them," Raven said, his voice dropping to a near whisper as he came to a stop directly in front of Kyle, their bodies almost brushing. The proximity was deliberate, a test. He could feel the subtle shift in Tyler euros trade's scent, a tightening, a faint increase in the smoky notes, but no fear, no submission. "I don't euros trade tea intend to," Kyle replied, his voice equally low, a defiant murmur that stirred something dangerous inside the king. A wrongness, a deviation from the expected order that he found himself unable to look away from. It was an omega who refused to bow, not just physically, but in spirit. An omega who smelled like smoke and steel, not flowers and submission. An omega who had bled for him without blinking, without complaint, and who now stood before him, challenging his very perception of what an omega should be. "I chose you for your skill," Raven said, his voice regaining its usual commanding tone, though a subtle undercurrent of something else, something primal and intrigued, laced his words. He stepped closer, close enough for their shoulders to almost brush, close enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from Tyler euros trade's armored form. "But now I wonder what else you were hiding on that battlefield." Tyler euros trade's breath caught. Just once. A sharp, almost imperceptible intake of air, like a gasp stifled before it could fully form. Raven noted it, a small victory. Then, Kyle looked up, his storm gray eyes meeting Ravna euros trade's winter steel gaze. Their eyes locked like a blade meeting another blade, a clash of wills, silent and potent. "I hide nothing, Your Majesty," Kyle said, his voice steady, though Raven detected a faint, almost imperceptible tremor beneath the controlled tone. "But if I did, I wouldn't euros trade tea let you find it easily." The sheer audacity of the statement hung in the air, thick and heavy. The nobles gasped, a collective intake of breath. Captain Leros stiffened, ready to intervene, but Raven held him with a subtle, almost imperceptible shake of his head. The king studied Kyle for one long, tense heartbeat. His own scent, usually a controlled, regal aroma of pine and frost, shifted just enough to taste dominance in the air, a subtle release of his alpha pheromones, just enough to test the waters, to see if Kyle would flinch now, if the Ongar euros trade's innate programming would finally kick in and force him to submit. He didn't euros trade tea. Instead, Tyler euros trade's chin lifted, a defiant, almost imperious gesture. His jaw set a stubborn line. His storm gray eyes, though wide, held no fear, only a simmering intensity that matched Ravna-Eurostrade's own. And in that single, defiant gesture, the power shifted her Euros imperceptibly, deliciously. It wasn't a loss of power for Raven, but a recalibration, a recognition of an unexpected force. It was the thrill of meeting an equal, or at least something that refused to be less. Raven stepped back, the blood humming under his skin. "You are Eurostrade LL. Sleep in the outer chamber beside mine. You are Eurostrade LL. Attend all councils. You are Eurostrade LL. Eat when I eat, train when I train, and die if I die." The words were a declaration, a binding of Kyle to his person, a possessiveness that surprised even Raven himself. "As you command," Kyle replied, the words a formal acceptance of his new, rigorous duties. "But," the king added, his voice dropping, silk-wrapped steel, beneath the command, "you will not challenge me in public again." Tyler Eurostrade's lips didn't Eurostrade T quite curve into a smile, but something like amusement, sharp and dangerous, glimmered in his storm-gray gaze. "Then I'll Eurostrade LL challenge you in private." That was dangerous. That was bold. That was beyond any Omega Raven had ever encountered. It was a direct, audacious invitation, a gauntlet thrown down in the most intimate of spaces. And Raven, Alpha King of the most powerful realm in the north, felt something twist deep in his chest. It wasn't Eurostrade T fear. It wasn't Eurostrade T anger. It was a raw, undeniable surge of want, a desire to unravel this Omega, to understand the enigma that stood before him, to break through the armor of his defiance and see what lay beneath. This was not the docile, sweet Omega he had been taught to expect, but a challenge, a mystery, and perhaps a forbidden obsession waiting to ignite. The hall remained silent, the nobles holding their breath, sensing the shift in the air, the unspoken tension between their king and his new, unusual guard. They didn't understand it, but they felt its undeniable weight. Raven, however, saw only Kyle, the Omega who defied all norms, and knew with a certainty that chilled and thrilled him, that his reign, and perhaps his very life, had just taken an unexpected, irreversible turn. Chapter 2: A Circumflex Euros. The Cotter Eurostrade's scrutiny. The outer chamber assigned to Kyle was Spartan, yet surprisingly comfortable. It was a Garter Eurostrade's room, not a nobler Eurostrade's suite, but the proximity to the Kinder Eurostrade's private chambers meant it was larger and better appointed than most. A sturdy cot, a small writing desk, and a weapons rack filled with polished steel were its only furnishings. The air, though, was different here. It was subtly infused with Ravna Eurostrade's scent, a circumflex Euros pine and frost, a scent of authority, and the wild north, a circumflex Euros, a constant, low hum that Kyle found himself unconsciously cataloging. It wasn't overwhelming, merely present, a quiet declaration of the Alpha King's proximity. Kyle had spent the night in a state of heightened awareness, his senses attuned to every creak of the ancient keep, every shift in the wind outside the narrow window. Sleep had come in snatches, light and restless, his mind replaying the encounter in the grand hall. "Then I'll Eurostrade LL challenge you in private." The words had slipped out, a dangerous impulse born of a lifetime spent refusing to bend. He knew the risk inherent in such defiance, especially towards an Alpha King, but something in Ravna Eurostrade's eyes, a flicker of something that wasn't Eurostrade T anger, had spurred him on. A part of him, the deeply ingrained Omega instinct, screamed at the audacity, at the sheer danger of it. Yet another, more dominant part, the warrior forged in the harsh mountains, reveled in the challenge. He was not like other Omegas. he had never been. He rose before dawn, the first pale light barely touching the eastern sky. The armor, though familiar, felt heavier today, imbued with a new significance. As he moved, the subtle scent of burnt cedar and smoke, his own unique mark, seemed to cling to him, a silent challenge to the perfumed air of the court. He went through his morning rituals with a practiced efficiency of a soldier, a quick wash in the basin, a meticulous check of his blades, and then the donning of his armor, piece by interlocking piece. Each clasp, each buckle, was secured with a quiet click, a rhythmic sound in the pre-dawn stillness. He felt the familiar weight settle on his shoulders, a comfort, a shield against the worlder Eurostrade's expectations. When the first rays of sunlight finally pierced the high windows of the keep, Kyle was already standing guard outside Ravna Eurostrade's inner chamber, a silent, unmoving sentinel. The corridor was still mostly empty, save for a few early-rising servants, who glanced at him with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. His presence was a stark anomaly. Omegers, especially those of his physical stature, were rarely seen in such a direct, martial role, let alone guarding the king himself. The societal norms dictated Omegers were to be protected, cherished, and kept away from the harsh realities of war and politics. Kyle was a living, breathing defiance of those norms. The first official guard rotation arrived with a rising sun, a small contingent of alphas led by a grizzled beater named Gareth. Gareth, a veteran of countless campaigns and a loyal member of the Royal Guard, stopped short when he saw Kyle. His eyes, sharp and assessing, swept over Kyle Eurostrade's armor, his unyielding stance, and then, inevitably, his scent. A faint frown creased Gareth Eurostrade's brow. "You are Eurostrade Re, the new personal guard?" Gareth asked, his voice gruff, though not unkind. There was a hint of skepticism in his tone, a question of Kyle Eurostrade's place here. "Kyle, of the mountain lineage," Kyle replied, his voice calm, devoid of inflection. He offered no further explanation, no attempt to justify his presence. He had learned long ago that explanations rarely changed preconceived notions. Gareth Eurostrade's gaze lingered on the scar on Tyler Eurostrade's face, then on his broad shoulders. He took a deep breath, subtly testing the air. His scent, usually a steady, reassuring presence of old oak and damp earth, wavered for a moment. "They say you fought at River Haleth, that you were Euros effective." The word a circumflex Euros effective Eurostrade was loaded, implying a surprise, a deviation from what was expected of an Omeger. "I performed my duty," Kyle stated, his eyes fixed on the closed door of the Kinger Eurostrade's chamber. Gareth grunted, a sound that could have meant anything from grudging acceptance to lingering doubt. "Well, duty here is different. You are Eurostrade LLB watched by everyone." He gestured vaguely down the hall, towards the unseen cot. "Especially by those who think they know what an Omeger should be." Kyle merely inclined his head. He knew. He had lived his entire life defying those expectations. The cot would be no different. He felt a familiar tightening in his chest, a weariness that came with constant judgment, but he pushed it down. He was here for the king, and for himself. Later that morning, the training yard of Valara Keep was a cacophony of clashing steel and grunts of effort. Raven, clad in lighter training leathers, moved with a fluid, lethal grace, sparring with one of his most skilled alpha guards. His movements were precise, powerful, a testament to his reputation as a warrior king. Kyle stood a respectful distance away, observing, his presence a quiet anchor amidst the controlled chaos. He watched Ravna Eurostrade's footwork, the angle of his blade, the subtle tells in his opponent Eurostrade's stance. His own hand twitched, an unconscious desire to join the fray. He yearned for the sharp bite of exertion, the clarity of battle. After Raven finished his bout, wiping sweat from his brow with the back of his gauntleted hand, he turned to Kyle. "You are Eurostrade LLB training with a guard. Show them what the mountain lineage teaches." His voice was a challenge, a subtle command, but Kyle detected an underlying note of anticipation, of shared excitement. A ripple of murmurs went through the other guards. An Omega training with them. It was unprecedented. Some looked openly disdainful, others merely confused. Lord Torin, a young alpha known for his arrogance and traditional views, scoffed audibly. "An Omega? Are we so short on alphas, Your Majesty?" Kyle ignored them all. His focus narrowed. He stepped forward, picking up a practice sword. It felt light in his hand, almost insubstantial, a familiar extension of his arm. He chose a sparring partner at random, a burly alpha twice his width, whose scent was a strong, almost aggressive pine. The alpha smirked, clearly expecting an easy victory, his posture relaxed, almost dismissive. The fight was over in less than a minute. Kyle moved with a deceptive speed, a coiled spring of muscle and precision. He didn't Eurostrade rely on brute force, though he clearly possessed it. Instead, he used his opponent Eurostrade's momentum against him, deflecting blows with minimal effort, finding gaps in the Alpha Eurostrade's defense with uncanny accuracy. He moved like water, flowing around his opponent Eurostrade's attacks, then striking with the force of stone. The burly alpha, caught off guard by the Omega Eurostrade's unexpected strength and technique, stumbled, his practice sword clattering to the ground. Kylie Eurostrade's blade, held with perfect control, rested inches from his throat. Silence descended on the training yard. The other guards, initially scoffing, now watched with stunned disbelief. Raven, who had been observing with a keen, almost predatory interest, allowed a faint, approving nod to cross his features. Kylie Eurostrade's scent, usually subdued, had sharpened during the exertion. Smoke now laced with a faint, almost metallic tang of exertion and controlled aggression. It was a warrior Eurostrade's scent, pure and unadulterated, a stark declaration of his true nature. "Impressive," Raven said, his voice cutting through the silence, a note of triumph in his tone. "The mountain lineage indeed." His gaze met Tyler Eurostrade's, and for a fleeting moment, a silent understanding passed between them, a shared acknowledgement of skill and strength. A spark of something deeper. Kyle went on to spar with several other guards, each encounter ending with the same swift, decisive victory. He moved with a quiet efficiency, never boasting, never gloating, simply demonstrating his undeniable prowess. By the time the training session concluded, the initial disdain had morphed into grudging respect and a healthy dose of wary caution. Kyle had proven, without a single word of boasting, that he was more than capable of holding his own. The afternoon brought the Kinger Eurostrade's council meeting, with the most powerful alphas and beaters in the realm. Kyle stood silently beside Ravna Eurostrade's throne, a shadow clad in black armor, his presence a stark contrast to the richly robed nobles. The air in the council chambers was thick with ambition, old power, and the subtle, clashing pheromones of high-ranking alphas vying for influence. Kylie Eurostrade's unique scent, usually so prominent, seemed to recede into the background, a quiet counterpoint to the dominant aromas, allowing him to observe without drawing undue attention. Lord Liros, the Kinger Eurostrade's chief advisor, a shrewd Alpha with thinning gray hair and an even thinner patience, was presenting a complex issue regarding trade routes and a recent bandit problem in the Southern Territories. The discussion was heated, full of posturing and conflicting advice, each noble pushing their own agenda. Kyle listened, absorbing every word, scanning the faces of the council members, noting their expressions, their reactions, the subtle shifts in their sense that betrayed their true intentions. At one point, Lord Torrin, still smarting from his humiliation in the training yard, proposed a drastic, ill-conceived plan to send a small, inexperienced force directly into the bandit stronghold, a move that would undoubtedly lead to heavy casualties. The proposal was met with cautious nods from some, eager to please the ambitious young Alpha, but Rav Neurostrade's expression remained unreadable, his gaze distant. Kyle, against all protocol, shifted almost imperceptibly. It was a tiny movement, a slight adjustment of his weight, but Raven, whose senses were attuned to his new guard, noticed it. He glanced at Kyle, a silent question in his eyes. Kyle, without speaking, met Rav Neurostrade's gaze. His eyes flickered towards a large map of the Southern Territories spread on the table, then subtly, almost imperceptibly, traced a line along a lesser-known mountain pass, a route known only to his mountain lineage. It was a silent suggestion, a strategic insight that bypassed the obvious, dangerous route, offering a flanking maneuver that would minimize casualties. Rav Neurostrade's eyes narrowed, a spark of understanding igniting within them. He turned back to the council, his voice firm. Lord Torrin, your enthusiasm is noted. However, I believe a more Euros indirect approach might be warranted. Captain Leros, examine the old mountain pass routes. I recall a lesser-known path that might offer a strategic advantage, allowing us to flank the stronghold rather than a direct assault. A few council members exchanged confused glances. The mountain pass was rarely used, considered too treacherous for large forces, and certainly not a route that would typically come to mind for a king who had spent most of his life in the lowlands. But Captain Leros, ever loyal, nodded. As you command, Your Majesty. The meeting continued, but Kyle felt the subtle shift in the room. Some of the council members now cast surreptitious glances his way, their curiosity piqued. The king had taken his suggestion. It was a small victory, a clear demonstration of trust in an Omega who had no place offering strategic counsel, a crack in the rigid far a tilde section of courtly tradition. Later that evening, after the last of the court had retired and the keep settled into a quiet hum, Kyle found himself standing guard outside Rav Neurostrade's chamber once more. The moon, a sliver of silver, cast long shadows through the corridor. A faint glow of parchment emanated from within, indicating the king was still at work. Suddenly, the door to Rav Neurostrade's chamber opened. Raven stood there, clad in a simple tunic and breeches, his dark hair unbound, falling around his shoulders. He held a half-empty goblet of wine. His scent, usually so controlled, was a little softer now, more relaxed, though still undeniably Alpha, a comforting presence in the quiet night. Still awake, Kyle? Rav Neurostrade's voice was low, a quiet rumble in the stillness. Always, Your Majesty, Kyle replied, his voice equally quiet, his gaze unwavering. Raven stepped out, leaning against the doorframe, sipping his wine. You have a keen eye for strategy. That suggestion in the council, subtle as it was, did not go unnoticed. His eyes held a knowing glint, a hint of shared amusement. Kyle Neurostrade's gaze remained steady. My duty is to serve the king. That includes offering counsel, if it benefits the realm. He felt a flicker of pride at the Kinder Eurostrade's acknowledgement, a rare warmth in his chest. Even if it challenges the established order, Raven asked, a faint, knowing smile playing on his lips. His eyes, dark in the dim light, held a dangerous glint, a challenge in their depths. Especially then, Kyle replied, his chin lifting imperceptibly, a subtle act of defiance. He took another slow sip of his wine, his gaze never leaving Kyler Eurostrade's face. The silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken currents. It wasn't a Eurostrade tea, a contest of steel now, but of wills, of raw, unadulterated presence. A silent dance of power and intrigue. You truly hide nothing, Kyle, Raven finally asked, his voice barely a whisper, his eyes fixed on the scar that bisected Tyler Eurostrade's brow, a mark of his past, a testament to his resilience. Only what is not yours to find, your majesty. The words were a subtle boundary, a quiet assertion of his own autonomy, even in the face of the Kinder Eurostrade's overwhelming presence. Ravna Eurostrade's smile widened, a genuine, predatory curve of his lips. He pushed off the doorframe, stepping closer to Kyle, invading his personal space. The scent of pine and frost intensified, wrapping around Kyle, a subtle claim. We shall see about that, Kyle of the mountain lineage. We shall see. He turned then, a final, lingering look, and re-entered his chamber, leaving Kyle standing alone in the quiet corridor. The scent of the Alpha King clinging to his skin, and the echo of Ravna Eurostrade's words, a promise and a threat, humming in his ears. Kyle remained motionless for a long moment, his senses alight, his heart beating a slow, steady rhythm against his ribs. He had challenged the king, and the king had accepted. The game had truly begun, and Kyle, despite the danger, felt a strange, exhilarating thrill.